I feel fear has always been something that has been prominent and been used as a tactical mechanism in order to get your point across. Specifically talking about the recent example with Brexit and tying that back to Donald Trump with these nationalistic views that are often wrapped in patriotism, but they play on fear of immigration, fear of people taking their jobs, fear of attack. Do you see how much can you see the connections between both? Between what Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson were playing on here, comparison to what Donald Trump has been playing on in the US?
Very striking. I mean, there's no coincidence. Nigel Farage, the leader of UKIP, the cheerleader, and he's this guy, he's been in, he's this classic example. He's a former, broker in the financial sector that caused the crisis, not him personally, but that sector did. Privately educated, went to a posh school, and then poses as this anti-establishment guy, the champion of the working man who's been screwed over by a liberal elite which wants to destroy their way of life with immigration. So that's a very striking comparison. He's now obviously giving advice to his good friend Donald Trump. So the connection could not be stronger. But I think what happened in the referendum is we had a referendum supposedly on membership of the European Union. A lot of people in the United States might go, well, that's a fair enough discussion. We should have had a referendum, but it wasn't really a referendum on that. It was a referendum about immigration. And what happened all the way through is politicians, rich, privileged politicians like Boris Johnson, who went to Eton, the most exclusive public school in Britain, where the royal family go and all the rest, and they stirred up bigotry and xenophobia and racism. Boris Johnson said about Barack Obama that it was his half Kenyan heritage that had led to anti-British resentment, and that's why he wanted Britain to remain members of the European Union. You got a official campaign that portrayed immigrants as rapists, murderers.
I was going to say, sounds similar to the guy that's got very similar hairstyles.
It's catastrophic. It is striking, the resemblance, and Turkish criminals were going to swamp the country. Nigel Farage stood in front of a poster of refugees fleeing violence with breaking point on it. It was a terrifying moment in British politics, and the danger is when Britain voted to leave, I think then what happened is it gave legitimacy to that. We saw a massive increase in hate crimes in this country. Lots of people I know were attacked, abused, accosted in the streets. I've been inundated with examples because they thought, well, if Boris Johnson, who's now Foreign Secretary of Britain, which is humiliating for our country because he's a clown, but they felt, well, he's saying it's legitimised. So they felt they had the mandate to go out and abuse people. But the reason it's similar is, I grew up in Stockport. Now, that's a town in northern England, which voted narrowly to remain in the European Union. But where I grew up, it didn't, because it was the posh suburbs that voted to stay. In Britain, it was working class people overall who voted to leave the European Union. There are lots of problems where I grew up, but not many immigrants. A lack of housing, because governments won't build them. A lack of secure jobs, because they've been destroyed in our economy. Living standards stagnating or falling. Public services under strain, because governments won't invest in them. Just like many of the economic insecurities in the United States, where wages have stagnated for working class Americans and middle class Americans for a generation or more. But the problem is people like me haven't come up with an actual answer to those problems. People on the left have failed to say, well, actually, this is government failure to invest, to defend your jobs and your living standards, because they put profit ahead of people's needs and aspirations. And it was immigration, it just filled the vacuum. It became a way of explaining many of the problems that people had. And that was stirred up cynically by politicians who didn't even believe half the stuff they were saying. And that's caused massive damage. But people like me have to take a bit of responsibility. And I think in America as well, people on the left also have to take responsibility. And it wasn't just the Republican administrations who fed. I mean, they legitimised a lot of the xenophobia and hatred for many, many years, Muslims, about women and all the rest. But also both wings, both parties, have left Americans feeling more insecure, poorer, more fearful about the future. It's the same in this country under both Labour and the Conservatives, and that's why both the United States and this country are in such a mess.
Can you listen to the same old corporate media?
Can't do it.
Now, I hear you, brother. Become part of the independent media. Join us. tytnetwork.com/join.